All right, my friends, we are live for an episode of Remodelers on the Rise. Welcome, welcome. I'm kind of expecting maybe a decent size audience today. One of my longtime clients was giving me some coaching the other day, and he said, boy, it would be nice if I could catch your live show, but you never send an email out about it. And then I've been thinking to myself, there's a difference between 5P, proper preparation prevents poor performance, and really 5P. I would say there's times where I am pretty prepared for these, and there's other times where I've really prepared. And wouldn't you know it, when you really prepare, the show usually ends up being better and more valuable to the audience. So I've been kind of playing around with the idea of maybe fewer shows. Let's do once a week. Let's promote them properly. Let's be thoughtful about the topic. Let's really prepare and deliver more value. So that's what we're up to today. I'm feeling pretty good about it. Even my video is a little higher quality. I bought a new MacBook Pro because my other one had been dragging, so that's kind of cool looking. And I'm looking forward to today's show. Can you let me know? We're already at double digits for viewers. Can you let me know you're out there? Give a little like, give a little comment, say hello. The other thing you can do is go to streamyard.com/Facebook, and you can approve so that I can see who it is that's watching. I saw a good morning. All right, we're off and rolling. So what we're going to cover today is a bit of a story, a bit of a workshop, if you will, related to a remodeler who's doing $2.5 million of top-line revenue. Okay, $2.5 million of top-line revenue. Has a decent gross profit, has a 15% net profit, and is fairly miserable. You think a 15% net profit on $2.5 million is would make some of your woes and some of your miserableness go away. But when you are stressed, when you have too much going on in your business, it's nice to have a good, healthy net profit, but it really reminds you that might not be my goal here. That might not be my end game. Something needs to change in order for me to have a healthy business, a healthy net profit, but also be healthy and not crazy stressed out in my life. So what we're going to do is we're going to look at this situation. I've got a nice little spreadsheet we're going to look at. Wow, I've got some happy Tuesdays. We've got some good afternoons. We've got some hello commas. Look at the people. Heather, Nicole, Mike, good to see you guys. All right. So we're going to pull up that little spreadsheet, and I'm going to tell you a little bit more about this situation. Tell you a little bit more about who this person is and what they're experiencing. And then we're going to go through and look at the different levers that they can pull to make improvements and to fix things in their business. Okay. There's Jim saying, first time on the YouTube. You sound good, Kyle. Good. A couple more likes. Hi, Tate. Hi, Michaela. Fun. All right. And ask questions as we go. So what you're seeing on the screen here, and I need to just adjust this. All right, there we go. All right, what you're seeing on the screen here is the sheet. I don't want to give you all the details yet. And I need to get rid of this and get rid of that and that. All right, we got a nice clean screen now. All right, so this is a business, remodeling business with $2.5 million in top line revenue. Now, does that mean they have $2.5 million of sales? It says total sales. You could even change it to total revenue. It might even, total income might even be better. 2.5 million, not necessarily sales. He might have $4 million in sales, but it's not showing up in this top line, this total income, until we collect the money and or produce the work. So what this is really showing is this is how much money they've collected, revenue they've collected for the work that they've sold and or produced. Does that make sense? So it's about a little over $200,000 a month. That's an interesting question. Do you think about how much you're producing, how much you're bringing in on a monthly basis? We don't need to obsess over the month by month. We don't need to go, I had a goal of 200,000. I'm at 150,000. It's time to panic. We don't need to do that. But there is some wisdom in having a little bit of a monthly goal, certainly a quarterly goal, to give you an indication of, am I behind kind of my sales goal? Am I right on pace? Am I way ahead of it? I would encourage you to have that number in mind. So there's your total income. And that is 2.5 million. Now, cost of goods sold. Did you see what I did there, folks? I have this whole spreadsheet and all of the questions all queued up, but they're in white lettering. So as I move through, I'm going to change it to black so we can focus just one at a time. I mean, give me a comment of how clever this is. I mean, this guy 5P'd for today. Hello from Seattle. Yes, we do. Yes, we do as far as the monthly. Cool. All right. Good. Cost of goods sold. His cost of goods sold, and I'm using a he because I have somebody in mind. I'm not going to tell you who they are. They're somebody I work with, but you don't need to know who it is. You can know about their situation. And look at everybody. Genius. I mean, is that all it takes in today's world to be called a genius? Is to queue up a spreadsheet, turn it to white lettering so it's hidden, and then unveil it? If so, the bar for being a genius is a little low. Nicole says, nice job. So clever. Okay, good. I got a good morning, Kyle. All right, fun. So the cost of goods sold. Oh, I'm sorry. And I got one more. Everybody wants to talk about this. That is impressive, he says. And somebody said, so tech geek, yes. And somebody said, so humble. I would say if you lined up my top 10 traits, I would hope that in the top 10, we'd find humility. Something I probably need to work on. Okay. All right, good. Anyways, let's stay focused. Cost of goods sold. So in this case, he has $1.7 million in cost of goods sold. That equals 68%. How do we calculate that percentage? We just take our total cost of goods sold dollars and we divide it by our total sales. 1.7 divided by 2.5 spits out our 68% cost of goods sold. Is that good? Is that bad? You can't answer that until you know what their markup is. That could be horrendous given their markup. That could be pretty good given their markup. So some things to consider there. So there we go. Cost of goods sold is 68%. Gross profit is $800,000. The way we get to gross profit is we have our total sales, total income minus cost of goods sold equals gross profit. Again, cost of goods sold, anything that it takes to produce the work out in the field. Now, there's some fuzzy areas. Does your project manager go into cost of goods sold? Some people do, some people don't. When it comes to equipment, if you have a piece of equipment, if you buy a 10,000 piece of equipment that you're going to use on most all of your jobs, a lot of times that'll be allocated and put in the overhead expenses category. If you rent a piece of equipment that's specific for that job, it should go in cost of goods sold. So there's a few gray areas. That's not what we need to dig into today. But that's just an indication, again, a reminder on what goes in cost of goods sold. And then we have gross profit. You need to say the words gross profit out of your face, out of your mouth more often than you do. What's our gross profit on that project? What's our gross profit on that project? What are we expecting to make in gross profit on that project? What did we actually make in gross profit on that project? We need to talk about that more. Gross profit is simply after you've paid all of your cost of goods sold, here's the amount that's left. In this case, when we take this minus this, he has $800,000 of gross profit, and he has a 32% gross profit margin. Okay, 32% gross profit margin. Now, if we scroll down here, this is a snazzy little markup versus margin spreadsheet. I just said he had a 32% gross profit margin. This first category, this first column are the margin numbers. When you look at your gross profit, you are not looking at a markup number. That 32% is not markup on your P&L, and it's not a markup on your job cost reports. That is a margin. The way that we find this 32% margin is 800,000 divided by 2.5 million in income gives us our 32%. These two numbers add up to 100. Okay, so going back down here, this 32% is the equivalent of a 47% markup. Most of you price your work based on markup, but we do because it's clear, it's straightforward. I take my total cost times 1.47. I get my selling price. That's how most of you do it. But we need to understand there's a difference between markup and margin. So if I were to tell you that this remodeler's markup is 40%, when you look at that 32%, you go, well, he's doing stinking good. He's got grippage. He's actually making more than what he was expecting to make in gross profit. But if I said, hey, his markup is actually 58%, you would look at that markup or that margin of 32% and be like, he's not doing so hot. He's got a lot of slippage there. Things are costing. The cost of goods sold is higher than what it should be. Cost of goods sold percentage is going up higher than it should be, and gross profit is getting driven down. He should have a 37% gross profit if he was actually bringing in the projects at the markup that he was selling it at. That's why it's so vitally important to look at our job costing. What is our expected gross profit and what is our actual? If your expected is higher than what you were expecting, if your actual is higher than what you were expecting, you have slippage. If your actual is higher than what, did I say that correctly? Let me make sure I said that right. If your actual is higher than what your expected is, then you have grippage. If your actual gross profit is a lot less than what you were expecting, you have slippage. Okay, so that just drives that home. So in his case, he's got a 32% gross profit. I'll tell you what his markup is as we get down here. You with me so far? Okay, good. Overhead expenses. He has $425,000 in overhead expenses. Comes out to 17% of his total income. The way we calculate that is the 425 divided by the 2.5. Okay, his overhead expenses is $425,000, which comes out to 17% of his overall sales. Okay, I'll tell you more about that category here in a second. And then what he's left with is a net profit of $375,000 or 15% of his income. So he has a net profit of $375,000 on the $2.5 million in income. Let's look at a few of these. Owner is stressed. Here's some situations, some questions based on what I just told you. The owner is stressed out. He's responsible for too many things. He's in charge of sales. He's still in charge of the production manager role. He does have some lead carpenters, but they are barely considered lead carpenters. They are not stepping in and really managing the projects, lining up the trades, make sure the 2-week look ahead and the schedule is locked and loaded. They're kind of mini lead carpenters. He's still taking the brunt of the responsibility for production management. Okay, so that's important to know. You can look at this, just the numbers, and say, well, this guy must be so happy. He's not. He's quite miserable right now and very stressed out. The owner is taking a $100,000 salary. You need to know this when you look at these numbers. A net profit that you look at without considering a few other things is sometimes a little bit of fool's gold. If I said, hey, in that $375,000, the owner hasn't paid himself a cent, then that net profit's not nearly as impressive. But if I told you, and this is the case here, the owner is taking a $100,000 salary, and that's already in the overhead expenses. That's good for you to know. That helps you understand how these numbers are flowing out. Now, he's an S Corp. So if he's an S Corp instead of a regular LLC, the reason he's taking a salary is because the CPA is saying, hey, you ought to be taking a salary, and then your pass-through income, your draw income. My CPA kind of likes me to be about 50-50. If I'm taking $200,000 out of my business, about 50% salary, 50% draw. Everybody's CPA is a little bit different, but in his case is that. And the reason we're an S Corp is so that we can save on Social Security, Medicare. Some of that pass-through income doesn't get taxed with the full amount that regular salary would. Okay. Net profit equals 15%. How are you feeling about that? Given what I've said so far on here, feel like that net profit is pretty healthy? Give me a little bit of feedback on that one. Todd said he's not getting paid appropriately for each of the hats he's wearing. Yeah, he's taking a certain amount of salary. That could be just because of the S Corp category of things. What do you guys think of the net profit so far? Somebody said, I truly have no idea. It's fair. Okay, that's fair. A net profit of 15% on $2.5 million. Wowza, this is us, seems low. That's why I'm here. Okay. Yowza, this is us, seems low. Okay. So, 15% net profit after the owner's paid himself $100,000. I would say it's pretty solid. I wouldn't say it's exceptional. I wouldn't say it's best in class, but I would say it's pretty solid. His overall overhead expenses, I shouldn't say overall overhead. His overhead expenses as a percentage of sales is pretty reasonable, a little low. His net profit of 15%. I mean, if you go down the road of a lot of coaches, consultants in our industry over the years, you know, that 8 to 10, that 12 to 15, if you're 15% plus in net profit, you're probably going to find yourself in the top 10, 15% of all remodelers out there. I've looked at a lot of P&Ls, and that's kind of been the case as I've looked at hundreds of them. So this is pretty solid. It's not the most amazing that I've ever seen, but it's pretty solid. His total sales is up from 2 million the year before. So just another little thing to note. You know, it's not an obscene growth rate year over year, but it's a pretty solid growth rate. His markup is 54%. Okay. How are you feeling about the gross profit now? A 54% markup equals a 35% gross profit margin. So there's a little bit of slippage there. This number could very, very well be 35%. Gross profit could be higher, which would lead to net profit being higher. We need to pay attention to our gross profit, how that interacts with our markup, and understand that interplay. Okay. And then one other thing here is how are his overhead expenses looking? You know, and 17%, you know, if it's a $2.5 million business, if it's under 20%, that's generally pretty good. But there's a lot of things that are kind of at play. Some people stuff more things in the cost of goods sold. Some people keep it down into overhead expenses. So you really have to analyze and dig into each individual P&L to really understand it. Okay. All right. So now let's talk about the levers. So we've got this picture, 2.5 million, 68% cost of goods sold, 32% gross profit. Okay. Now, what is his goal in 2022? Is his goal simply to increase net profit? Do you think this guy who is stressed out, who's wearing too many hats, who's not enjoying his business that has some pretty solid financials behind it, do you think his goal going into this upcoming year all revolves around profit? Give you guys a chance to respond to that. There's a little delay between the time I ask and the time you guys type. The answer is, oh, there we go. There's a no. They're starting to roll in now. No, the answer is no. There's another no. The answer is no. That's not his number one goal. Somebody said he needs to hire better people. Somebody said, I hope not. That's his goal. Right? What is your goal in the business? Who tells you that you're supposed to be a $5 million business? If you're not growing, you're dying. It's all about scale, scale, scale. You hear people saying that? What? Who are you to tell me that all my goal is to grow my business? You're not involved in my life. You're not involved in my stress level. You don't know my own personal financial situation. There's a lot of color in this and a lot to kind of decide upon. I would much rather have this client of mine making about $150,000 less of net profit and have a really happy marriage, have a really happy work-life balance. It's not terrible, by the way, but just as an example, that's kind of where my head goes. It's not all about just increasing net profit, is it? There's a lot to consider. Sometimes it is. Sometimes it's like, look, you're not making much net profit. You've got your structure in place. It's time for you to get that net profit up so you can be getting the type of return and making the type of money that you should be making. Sometimes that's the situation. But as you're listening to this, that's not necessarily the case. I think you're going to discuss burnout. Yeah, that's a great way to burn out if he just keeps going on the exact same path he is. Mike said he needs to look at his processes, in my opinion, refine them. Certainly part of it. Could be hiring, could be processes, it could be a variety of things. Okay. So in his case, making more money is not necessarily his goal. Stress reduction, reducing the noise, calming things down, even okay with making less money and really building the team around him and strengthening processes. All right. So let's talk about some of the levers he has to play with. First lever, he could increase sales. What would this do? If he increased sales to 3 million, everything else holds steady. What did that just do? It increased his gross profit. The only lever I played with there was total sales. I didn't mess with anything else. I just increased his sales from $2.5 to $3 million. That's one lever he can play with. All that did was increase his gross profit dollars, and all else being the same, it increased his net profit up to 18% from 15%. He's now got a net profit of $535,000. For some of you, that's the lever you need to pull. You got everything else in pretty good shape. I don't need to add to my overhead expenses. I've got my job costing dialed in and don't have a lot of slippage. I need to increase sales so I can kick out more gross profit and more net profit. In his case, that's not what he needs. Okay, but that's one lever you can play with. It's another lever. Another lever he could play with is he could reduce slippage. He could reduce slippage. What would that do? So let's say he reduces his slippage, okay, and he gets his cost of goods sold down to 65%, and he got his gross profit up to 35%. Given his markup, this is kind of where it would be if he was really bringing in his projects at the markup that he is selling them at. So in this case, the lever is I'm going to watch my job costing really, really closely. As a result of that, I'm going to be watching my estimating a lot closer. Am I quoting the right number of hours? Am I missing little things? The closer I watch my job costing, the better I become as an estimator. The better I become as a project manager. The better I become as a salesperson, because you're watching your job costing so closely that you know you need to sell it for that amount in order to kick out the gross profit that you're looking for. So in this case, he could watch his slippage. That would improve his gross profit. And again, it does something kind of similar to what the total sales increase would do. It improves his net profit. So that's another lever that you have to play with in your business, is not necessarily increasing your overall sales, but reducing your cost of goods sold and increasing your gross profit. You do that by watching your job costing closely, paying attention to that, continually improving your estimating, making sure that that thing you forgot on the last project, you don't forget this time, making sure that you put 10 hours in for punch list items so that when you're doing those 10 hours, you're actually getting paid for them. Making sure that you really realistically look at it and go, you know what, I put 20 hours for demo. I was a bad estimator. Like, it legit took them 30. I need to correct that for next time. If you're not watching your job costing, you're going to continue to be a crummy estimator. But if you fix it because you see it and you watch it and you realize, okay, I can fix this. You just fixed it for time and time again into the future. One estimating fix on something that you constantly forget saves you tens of thousands of dollars over the course of the decade or two ahead of you. So that's another lever he could play with. He could reduce his slippage. What's another lever? I'm back to the normal spreadsheet here again. He could increase his markup. That's another lever he could play with. He could increase his markup. You want to play with your numbers a little bit, improve them? You can increase your markup. What would that do? If we don't even mess with our job costing much and we just straight up say, I'm charging more for my work, it's going to do the same thing that it just did with our slippage. All of a sudden, we increase our markup. We get this thing down to 63%. This up to 37%. It's going to drive down my cost of goods sold. It's going to drive up my gross profit. And since I haven't messed with my overhead expenses, it's going to increase my net profit. In this case, if I move my gross profit up to 37%, I'd have a net profit of 20% that I'd be staring at. Okay, so that's another lever that he could play with and that you could play with. Now, none of these levers are necessarily so far hitting on his 2022 goal, which is reducing his stress and his workload. Let's continue. What's the next lever he could play with? Next lever could be he could add to his management staff and increase his overhead expenses. He could hire a project manager to just take the load off on the production side. Maybe he doesn't want to do that, and he hires an office manager. Now a bunch of that office work and some of that work that he has on his responsibility list has been passed off, reducing his stress and his workload in that area, which gives him more time to manage the other areas. That would be an option. He could hire a salesperson. Similar thought there. Hand off that responsibility to somebody else, reduce his workload. He could hire an estimator or a designer, right? That would allow him to take that load off his plate. Now, if he did that, let's say it cost him $100,000, okay, and he keeps his total sales the same. He's not messing with any of these other levers of reducing slippage or messing with his markup. He just adds $100,000 to his overhead expenses. What that's done is just reduced. Hang on, my numbers. Let me get my numbers back to where I want them here. 68. There we go. There we go. What he's done there is he's reduced his net profit from $375,000 down to $275,000. His net profit has dropped from 15% down to 11%. But that investment in the business will hopefully and should, especially if you're patient and you train well and you hire well, that investment should reduce his overall workload, should reduce his stress level, should help him feel a little bit more in control of the business. Okay, so that's another big lever, especially in his case, that he can play with. And thinking of this client is exactly the direction he's starting with. Okay, another lever, he could aim for less net profit in his business. And again, that ties in with overhead expenses, but sometimes that's a mental shift of actually preparing and saying, you know what, I'm planning on taking $100,000 less out of the business this year. Last year was great. The year before was great. I'm willing to do that, not to increase sales right now. I don't know if that's healthy. I am going to increase my overhead expenses, and I'm okay with taking a little bit less and pulling that lever of net profit in the business. Certainly could be an option. And then let me hit you with a couple other things. So what you're seeing here is understanding your numbers and understanding the levers that you can play with. There's nothing super rocket science-y about this, but my goal with this is to hopefully remind you and show you maybe in a little fresh way some of these different levers that you can play with. Now, the reality is that a lot of times we can play with a few levers at a time, right? We can say, you know what, we're going to work to increase sales. We're going to work to increase our markup and also watch our job costing better, which is going to push down cost of goods sold and push up our gross profit. While doing that, we're going to invest more into our business, hire a few key people to reduce the overall workload. And depending on how those levers are pulled, sometimes even by increasing your investment in your business, sometimes even that first year, you're improving your net profit. Sometimes by playing with a couple levers, you're improving your net profit by a considerable amount. Okay. And then this one says, are there any other options that you guys are thinking of or other questions that you have? All right. So what we're looking at here again is just is a average, kind of P&L, just a pretty straightforward P&L. Somebody that's doing pretty decent in their business overall. And we're looking at the situation. We're considering and thinking strategically about some things. And we're looking at the levers that we can adjust and work with to improve it. Okay. What do we got here? Dan says some team business planning could be in order. Getting the team involved in deciding what direction that they might want to go. It's an interesting thought. Mike says, where did the 56% markup number come from? In his case, he's if you actually studied his markup on, let's say, for example, he's got a markup kind of across the board that he uses on all of his materials, trades, and on his in-house labor. But then he also, the difference between what he puts in as a cost per labor hour, okay, what he puts in as a cost per labor hour before putting his markup on, there's a pretty sizable difference between his fully labor burdened cost and what he's putting in for a cost. Let's say his fully labor burdened cost on average is $40 an hour. He's putting in $65 an hour or $60 an hour. So there's gross profit he's making on that difference between the full labor burden cost and the cost number he's putting in his estimates, and then markup on top of that. So in order to understand his true markup, we have to calculate kind of both of those things. So in his case, that's how he's doing it. Okay. Cool. What else is on your guys' minds? Hopefully that was helpful. What were a few either additional questions you have there, or what were a few takeaways that you had from watching that? Besides the fact that I am logoed up, I am color coordinated with a red shirt. I've got the new background because I'm working from home today. Is it bad that I didn't feed the kids lunch yet? The two little kids are home from school today because they have it off because their building gets used for local elections. And I said, hey, I'm 5P'ing for this. I'll fix you lunch after the live show. They seemed fine about it. They just ate a few more pieces of candy. What were a few takeaways that you had from watching this? Here's a takeaway. Woo! Paying attention to your COGS is key. Yes. And if that was your takeaway, may I say directly to you, you're not watching it close enough, my friend. Watch that closer. Pay attention to your expected cost of goods sold and your expected gross profit and what your actual is. Dan's takeaway is I am with it. He's impressed by the new, I have not put effort towards branding very well. And I mean, we got stickers, we got stickers now. We got all kinds of stuff. I think it's important. By the way, are you not staying in touch with your previous clients at all? If you're not, can you do me a favor and go to remodelersautopilot.com and give that a try? It's $1 to try out. It's $125 a month thereafter. It just works really well and makes that part of your business so much easier. Another takeaway, job costing is such an important function. Yeah, if we're wrestle for that, find it. It doesn't have to be super complicated. Pay attention to that. Understand what your expected versus your actual was. Know what your slippage is. Know what your grippage is. That makes a huge difference. It's a huge lever that when you haven't really worked in that area can really, really move the needle. Okay, excellent. Well, my friends, that is what we call a successful Remodelers on the Rise episode. I'm glad that you guys tuned in for it. I'd love to hear more takeaways. If you need any help in this area, this is an area that I love doing coaching on. I've got one-on-one coaching that I can do on this. I've got a course that really digs into everything we talked about today called How to Make More Money in Your Remodeling Business. Just reach out and I can point you in the right direction on that. Appreciate you tuning in. We'll see you next time. Catch you later.